Hi guys, quick lesson today on literature structure or story structure. Basically, how a story is put together. Maybe this picture will help some of this ring a bell. Like a roller coaster, when we put the story together, these are its parts. Exposition, that's the setting and the characters and the background information. Rising action is the events leading up to the climax or the turning point of the story. This is where the most excitement happens. Falling action is all of the events that are helping to solve the problem in the story. And resolution is the end of the story, where the conflict is taken care of and fixed. Conflict is the problem in the story. Now, this slide gives me the definitions of each of these pieces of a story. And all fiction stories, or all good fiction stories, are built this way. They begin with the exposition. That is the setting, the characters, and what the story is about, the narration of the beginning. Exposition includes the setting and characters when the story begins. It also explains what situation the characters are in. The conflict is the problem in the story. What's going on that the characters are having to deal with? The rising action is the action between the beginning and the middle of the story that leads up to the climax. The climax is the problem of the story. It's the part of the story that is going to hold the most excitement. It's the turning point of the story where all the things are going to begin to change. Falling action is after the climax, and it's all of the events that lead up to the resolution. Helps to wrap up the story. And the resolution is when the conflict or the problem is resolved. And the characters get their happy ending. I hope this helps to remind you of all of the pieces of a story. Now, listen carefully while I read to you a really quick and very simple story called Frog and Toad Are Friends. This is a very simple chapter book, so we're going to be reading chapter 1, titled Spring. And then we're going to discuss this literature structure diagram. Frog ran up the path to Toad's house. He knocked on the front door. There was no answer. "Toad, Toad!" shouted Frog. "Wake up! It is spring!" "Blah!" said a voice from inside the house. "Toad, Toad!" cried Frog. "The sun is shining. The snow is melting. Wake up!" "I'm not here," said the voice. Frog walked into the house. It was dark. All the shutters were closed. "Toad, where are you?" called Frog. "Go away," said the voice from a corner of the room. Toad was lying in bed. He had pulled all the covers over his head. Frog pushed Toad out of bed. He pushed him out of the house and onto the front porch. Toad blinked in the bright sun. "Help!" said Toad. "I cannot see anything." "Don't be silly," said Frog. "What you see is the clear, warm light of April, and it means that we can begin a whole new year together, Toad." "Think of it," said Frog. "We will skip through the meadows and run through the woods and swim in the river. In the evenings we will sit right here on this front porch and count the stars." "You can count them, Frog," said Toad. "I will be too tired. I'm going back to bed." Toad went back into the house. He got into the bed and pulled the covers over his head again. "But Toad," cried Frog, "you will miss all the fun." "Listen, Frog," said Toad. "How long have I been asleep?" "You've been asleep since November," said Frog. "Well then," said Toad, "a little more sleep will not hurt me. Come back again and wake me up at about 1/2 past May. Good night, Frog." "But Toad," said Frog, "I will be lonely until then." Toad did not answer. He had fallen asleep. Frog looked at Toad's calendar. The November page was still on top. Frog tore off the November page. He tore off the December page, and the January page, the February page, and the March page. He came to the April page. Frog tore off the April page too. Then Frog ran back to Toad's bed. "Toad, Toad, wake up! It is May now." "What?" said Toad. "Can it be May so soon?" "Yes," said Frog. "Look at your calendar." Toad looked at the calendar, and May was on top. "Ah, it is May," said Toad, and he climbed out of bed. Then he and Frog ran outside to see how the world was looking in the spring. The end. Sweet little story about friends. Now let's take a look at the pieces of the literature structure, and we're going to put them in the correct places on my diagram. Remember, the conflict is the problem in the story. Exposition is going to be the setting and the characters. Rising actions, the actions and the events between the beginning and the middle, where we find the climax. Climax is going to be the turning point of the whole story. The falling action is the events between the climax and the resolution, where the story gets wrapped up. And the resolution is where the problem gets solved. So let's see. First one, setting, characters, Toad's house in the spring, and Frog and Toad. Well, this is obviously exposition. So I'm going to pick up this box, and I'm going to drag it down here to exposition. Frog ran back, woke up Toad to tell him it was May, and show him the calendar. Well, that happened probably over here in falling action. So I'm going to pick up this box and put it over here on top of falling action. It is spring and Toad will not get up. Well, that's definitely the problem. So I'm going to drag the box over here. Frog tore all the pages off Toad's calendar until he got to May. That is my climax. That's where everything starts to change. Once he discovered it was May, he could go wake Frog or go wake Toad up again. So my rising action and my resolution is all that's left. Resolution is when the problem is solved and how the story ends. Rising action are events that happen in the beginning. Toad looked at the calendar and hopped out of bed. He and Frog ran outside to see the world. Well, that's definitely how the story ends. So I'm going to put that over here on resolution. Frog tried everything he could think of to get Toad up. That was what was happening in the beginning of the story. I'm going to drag this over here to rising action. I can probably move this over now. Exposition is the setting the characters and the very beginning telling us what's happening. Rising action is the events in between the beginning and the middle. Climax is where the turning point of the story is, where something exciting is getting ready to happen. Falling action is when all of the events begin to get wrapped up, leading to the very end of the story. And resolution is how the problem is solved. Conflict is always the problem in the story. You're going to get one of these assignments to do by yourself, and I will be reading another chapter from Frog and Toad. I thought I'd start trying this activity with just a simple story. Hope this helps.